Please join me in welcoming Ken to tell us about the amazing story of the Battle River Railway.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, thank you very much. Listening to the number of presentations so far in the last couple of days, an issue has come forth. We're struggling as rural communities to be viable, but yet at the same time, we're having to decide how we would change that viability, what projects would be best to initiate action in our home communities. In our instance, looking at the picture over there, it worked a little bit differently. A project was thrust at us, and we simply could not allow this piece of infrastructure to disappear. So this story that I'm going to tell you is about that whole process. Now, I farm in the Daysland area, not nearly as actively as I did before, and things are going the way they're supposed to. I'm getting out of the picture. We've been talking about transitioning. I'm getting out of the picture, and my son is taking over the farm. We're a fourth generation farm, and he's got a young son. He's 6, and he's a real Lego and mechanical nut, so I think the farm is in good hands for at least another 50 years. It's really quite neat. I think I was quite a bit like that when I was young, but watching yourself again, you know, when they're 6, it's quite an interesting experience. We farm we farm 2,200 acres in the heart of Alberta. It's a very, very, very productive farming area. We grow wheat, as do now. We're not atypical. The majority of farmers in our area grow wheat and canola, some barley, quite a few peas, occasional flax. There might be something else I've missed, not sure. I grew sunflowers one time. They look really beautiful. They're hard to market. I did learn one thing. When you went to school, there was a myth that's perpetrated in school. It says that, at least at the school I went to, that if you plant a sunflower, there's a likelihood that it's going to follow the sun. The head's going to turn. Okay, so my road where I had the sunflowers was on the right-hand side of the field, so I thought every morning as I drove down it, the sunflower faces would all turn to greet me. Not so. I had to walk into my sunflower field so that I could see their faces. So the next year I planted them on the other side of the road, and then that was perfect. But that's a bit of an aside. Yeah, we live in a hugely productive and actually now prosperous farming community. It hasn't always been that way. Farming, as you've heard a few people mention, is a lot of work, and often it's a struggle. It's been community-based because of its nature. Historically, we had to work together because most of the jobs on the farm required significant muscle power, and the more the merrier. So, here's a picture of a SP40. Now, you're going to learn a little bit about railroading, and I hope you don't mind, right? Because sometimes it's hard to do a short course in a short period of time. But if there's the odd term you don't understand, I'll try to explain it. Just throw up your hand or something, because I don't want to lose you. I realized as I was reading through this, because the last time I presented this, I was presenting it to a bunch of farmers who understood all of the terms I used. So don't be shy to stop me. This picture here is a culmination of a lot of work. It's actually, it represents 8 years of work. And still, though, it was just the beginning. If you can probably imagine that. Now, I love telling this story of the Battle River Railway. A lot of mornings I still wake up wondering if it's true. Have we really been able to pull this off? Did we accomplish what we think we've accomplished? And of course, any story is dynamic. things begin to happen if it has a bit of success that you didn't even dream might happen. And that's a wonderful thing, except though, that means that you have to be able to react to the things that are coming your way. And when you don't necessarily have a lot of experience in this particular new field, that can be a bit stressful. But anyway, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to tell you what I consider to be a very good news rural story. Most of our rural stories for many years now have not been uplifting. They have usually involved the loss of something, be it infrastructure, businesses, and of course people. We've lost churches and schools and railroads and retail and theater and local grain accumulation facilities and hospitals and doctors and freight delivery services and public transit systems, and I'll stop there, you're getting depressed, I know. The list goes on, but you people all know about this. You live in a slightly different area, but things are happening similarly to you. The story that I'm about to tell is a story about a community that is attempting to reverse this rural trend of loss. It's a story about a railway, and it's called the Battle River Railway, to be precise. Now, where's the Battle River, right? Okay. The Battle River is kind of right in the middle of Alberta. Edmonton, you know where Edmonton is. I live in a little town called Daysland, and Daysland is 1.5 hours southeast of Edmonton. The Battle River Railway, the Battle River, not the railway itself, starts a bit west of Highway 2, sort of towards the mountains, but it's basically a landlocked river. And it meanders along quite a little bit, and when you see it, it's really quite picturesque, but it doesn't carry a lot of water necessarily. You certainly couldn't irrigate out of it. But it has performed a really useful function for our area in that 90% of the things where we are named after the Battle River Railway. So we couldn't miss this opportunity. We are the Battle River Railway. I live in Daysland, which, like I say, is 1.5 hours east. The Battle River Railway is a half an hour south of me. And it's just immediately south of where our actual railroad is. Now, do you folk know where Camrose, Alberta is? Very good, I see a few hands. Okay, all you displaced Albertans, is that what you are? No. Our little Battle River Railway, because I don't like the idea, I think I sat on my glasses and they don't fit on my head quite straight, so if I look peculiar, it's probably true that's what happened. The Battle River Railway starts at a little community called Alliance, Alberta. Anybody know Alliance, Alberta? Holy smokers. Look at that, that's very good. Okay, a lot of times, you know, I don't always go with convention. Someone will say, where do you live? Well, I had to mention Camrose just to kind of get you going there, right? But our railway runs from Alliance to Camrose. It doesn't run from Camrose to Alliance. Because I have to mention Alliance first. It's the most important town on our line. So the Battle River Railway runs from Alliance to Camrose. We have 6 beautiful little towns on our line, and I could mention the names, but, well, okay, I will, since you do Alliance. There's Alliance, and then there's Galahad, then there's Forestburg, which is our headquarters, then there's Heisler, where we have an 80-year-old Oktoberfest sausage supper every fall, and then there's Roseland, Alberta, and there's Kelsey, and then finally comes Camrose. Now, we pull cars along our line at each of the sidings, so 6 sidings, and we end up then interacting or interchanging in Camrose, Alberta, where we get to meet our partner, CN Rail. And then we usually leave Camrose with a very glum-looking face because CN Rail has issues. I'll leave it at that for a second. Okay, this picture was taken on December 14th of 2010. And it represents well over 1,000 words. It also represents the culmination of a huge time and effort by community members to create the Battle River Railway. It was taken as we were celebrating the arrival of our first locomotive, this old SD40, which would allow us to do what railroads do. And in our instance, this railway was going to move grain. We're all 2,200 acre farmers about per person, and we have a fair bit of grain to move. It's a 16-cylinder, 3,000 horsepower, basically workhorse. They're good old engines. They never break down. They're kind of versatile, and we were happy to have them. This is one spot where I can't badmouth CN because they made us a good deal when we purchased this locomotive from CN. Shortly after this picture was taken, we pulled our first train, which was, you have to understand, an incredibly exhilarating experience. When you see a locomotive that you and your neighbors bought pull 50 cars of grain you produced on a train that you own to market in Camrose. This story, however, started in the spring of 2003 when an ad appeared in a local newspaper indicating that CN was planning to discontinue a particular railway. And when we read the fine print, here it was ours. So we got a bit concerned. We had a meeting. Well, actually, we made a few calls first. And then shortly after, we had a meeting in my kitchen. We didn't want this to happen. Now you have to understand that this little short line is what, now here we're going to learn a bit about railroading. It's 132 pound steel. And that means that for every meter, or not meter, but every yard, the steel weighs 132 pounds. And guess what? It's continuously welded. Now that's a rarity on a short line. So when you come out to Forestburg to ride on our tourism excursion, which I will mention later, you're going to be a wee bit disappointed because you won't hear the clickety-clack. With continuously welded steel, we've eliminated the clickety-clack. You just have to put up with the smooth, silk-like ride as we serve you finger foods and maybe a little bit of wine. But I think you'll be able to cope. Now, a few individuals in the various communities got together at our place, and they were all concerned. Now, you have to understand that for a little while already, and this is how CN always does this, and maybe some of you have direct experience with this process. CN begins by realizing they don't want to continue a short line. So they start giving you the worst service in the history of railroading, right? Trying to discourage you. And any relatively intelligent person would take the clue most of the time. However, this was such fabulous infrastructure, we decided to fight them. So what we did at the outset is we went to Saskatchewan, southern Saskatchewan, where they were a little bit ahead of us. Saskatchewan, you know, we Albertans think we're pretty smart a lot of days, but actually our Saskatchewan friends sometimes are smarter than we are. So we went to southern Saskatchewan to see how a group of farmers down there had managed to save not one, but several. But we went to a specific short line that was in the middle of a fight. And what they had done is there's a provision in the Canada Grains Act whereby if you order through the Canadian Grain Commission a car for you to load, like you individually to load, CN is obliged to provide service. So we were actually fairly used to loading producer cars. I've loaded producer cars most of my life, but it's never been done kind of en masse. Now, I do appreciate CN a little bit when it starts talking about the business model, that you have to have greater volumes in order to make pulling cars and trains affordable. I do understand that. I just don't like the way they go about telling their message. So, when we went to Southern Saskatchewan, we talked to these fellows who were, they had actually spotted 100 producer cars on a little line south of Kindersley, Saskatchewan, and CN was providing them service. So after we had taken a look at that, they had also built some fancy facilities, which we weren't going to do at any time in the immediate future of 2003. We had gone down there to look at that, and we were impressed. So later, that was in 2003, spring off. The fall of 2003, we started loading and ordering first, and then loading producer cars. And that winter, we loaded 500. And CN started its process of providing us with the worst railway service in the history of railroading. But we persisted. So, from 2003, or 03, 04, that's kind of the way we tell about a crop year, to the crop year 8-9, 2008, 2009, we averaged 525 producer cars a year, which wasn't bad considering before we weren't moving any, right? Every fall, we would go to days, I would go to Edmonton. We would get to go to Edmonton, to the CN Tower in Edmonton, to talk to our partners, CN. And they would say, we'd sit around this really nice board table on the 24th floor, and we'd say, or they'd say, now fellas, you have to understand, you're just not pulling your weight here. They were telling us. We need more volume, more cars we need. And we would very readily tell them, well, this is interesting because there's no possibility of our being able to raise volumes with the kind of service that you provide. And it went on like that for 6 consecutive years. It was mind-blowing. Now, this will be coming up maybe a little later, but this is a good spot to tell this part of the story. So, the target was always moving also. So we would say to them, well, okay, if we're not moving enough grain and you think we can figure out how to raise the amount, where do we have to get to so that you will provide us with a predictable service? Well, the one time it was 800, and then it would go up. The first time or the second time we met, I guess it was 800. And then it became 1,000, and then it got to 1,200. And the last time we met with them when they were still providing service, it had reached 1,300. Okay, we know what our target is, right? After our married partnership disintegrated completely with CN, we then started operating the line, and we were attracting significant business to the line. And last year we moved 2,200 cars. Yeah, I know you're shaking your head thinking, that's good stuff, right? Well, it should be, right? Except now, CN says, after we've ordered the cars, and they didn't come this week, well, we thought they were supposed to come this week, and then they didn't come last week. Now they tell us they don't have enough cars for our business. We're shipping too many cars. So we're quite perplexed. And this seems like a good spot to expand the story a tiny little bit. So interior BC is actually not a bad spot to locate some markets. We moved some grain to Rogers out of Chilliwack for flour milling, and we moved some feed grain into the interior here where you require feed. So, not this winter, but the winter past, where we had a really bad winter in Alberta. I don't know what you had here, but it was a long one with a fair bit of snow. We didn't get one car to service these interior BC domestic markets for 27 weeks. Now you folk are smart. You realize that's a half a year, right? So, not only were we not moving grain, but our customers in the interior were having to find ways to access grain. So we kind of did a tricky thing. We went out and we leased some cars, which CN doesn't like at all. But we had to figure out how we were going to get CN to the negotiating table so that we could actually talk about our need for cars. So we leased 77 cars from a firm in the United States. It turned out to be more of a learning experience than we really needed, but that's another story. 77 cars, and our general manager of the time suggested that we were going to get the majority of the monies back, in terms of what the lease fees were going to cost us, in what we call, what do we call it? Not the marriage. Anyway, the money that the railway is supposed to pay us for the use of the car on the line, the name of it just escapes me for a second. We hadn't planned on the fact, though, that as soon as CN became aware that we had these cars, they were going to add an extra $1,050 tariff to the movement of these cars. And when we're sitting around as small entities wondering what we can do, rest assured that you're able to do something. Because tiny little Battle River Railway, leasing 77 cars, was almost single-handedly able to completely disrupt the logistical flow of cars of CN. It was such a big deal, they didn't know how life was going to go on. We had to get this resolved. Yeah, so small organizations can do big things. So finally, and just lately now, we have sat down with them, and we have, I think, resolved the issue, but not without some significant consternation. So the 77 cars have stayed, and we are going to be guaranteed 25 cars per week out of that fleet of ours, 77 cars, and then we will use that to service these domestic markets. And then we're also supposed to get some cars from what they call the general fleet. Now, this is going to start on the 1st of June. So we'll be, next time I'm here next year, I'll tell you how this goes. No, I'm still a little bit hesitant to suggest that we have this resolved, but it's looking more like it's going in the right direction. So, here we go. One other issue that was very important to our group is deciding the business model to adopt for the purpose of purchasing and governing our railroad. We quickly decided on a new generation cooperative model. Co-ops have been very instrumental over the years in helping deliver goods and services to the rural area. We thought a co-op would work perfectly. So we immediately began talking to our farmers and community members on a one-to-one basis in kitchens and over coffee. And we began selling shares to raise the money that we were going to need. We needed actually $5 million. So, we were eventually able to raise $3.5 million from our local community. And we have 151 farmers that are shareholders. We have 125 community members who like to hear the whistle blow. Like the nice lady said at the outset there. We have agricultural societies. Do you know what an ag society is? Okay, very good. We have seed cleaning plants. We have municipalities. Now, the municipalities that live along our line don't have much money, but they gave us a little bit of money. And we have small businesses that have all taken part. We partnered that $3.5 million local dollars with monies that we borrowed from the Alberta Financial Services Corporation. And on June 18th, 2010, we took ownership of the Alliance Sub, and we had a big party. So, I've been sort of a little bit out of order here, but rest assured, you'll find out how my brain works as this goes along. So now that we're a railroad, what do we do? Okay. Oh, well, that's me. Oh, here we are. Oops. There we are. Okay, this looks like some train cars, which it is. But this picture shows us speeding down the track, doing our business, loaded up there with grain, and we're taking it to Camrose, Alberta. How fast can we go, you ask? That's probably on the top of your mind. We're a Class 2 railway. We can go 25 miles an hour. Not fast enough. You also have to understand that this Alliance sub was not just any old piece of track. I told you about that. It was continuously welded steel and had been upgraded in 1987 under the Prairie Short Line Rehabilitation Program, as well as the sidings. Here we are at our most active siding, which is Forestburg, Alberta. Now, the landscape and the profile around the railway at each of our sidings is changing quite significantly, but that's just a very recent phenomenon, and I haven't been able to put a picture in there. But for the first 8 years, basically what we did is we had hopper bottom bins, which are those white ones there, and we would load them as farmers, and then when the train would come, we would busily take the grain out of the hopper bottom bin and load it into the car. And then when they were all done, we'd pull them back to Camrose. There's, would you believe that on our line of 60 miles, 30 years ago, there were 25 elevators. 25 elevators. All of them in use. So I guess how many there are now? I wish. There's 2, and one's in use, the other one is rotting. We have a caveat. The town of Alliance has a caveat, an hysterical caveat on that elevator that can't be torn down unless Alliance is allowed to react to it. And the company refuses to move, so it sits there and it's just deteriorating. So shortly, even the pigeons will be abandoning it. But in a way, I mean, it's a terrible, terrible loss because those are beautiful old monuments. They had some issues, you know, they were prone to catch on fire, and there's a few other things. But still, big grain and big rail are not nice people. We had a beautiful, beautiful elevator in the town where I grew up, which is a little town called Strome. Anybody know Strome? It was a beautiful, look at that. You must have spent some time out there, right? It was a gorgeous elevator built in 1982. It got about 5 bids from different groups whereby they would have moved that elevator or used it in place. One morning we woke up and there it lay in a big pile of rubble. Right? That's the way these folk operate. So, okay, let's try the next one. We're a family operation. And this is a picture of a father and son here having a fun time loading a car. There's a great big auger, you'll notice, and I guess I can look down here, and it's loading into the car. It's a fairly easy process. Here's another family entity, young sons, loading grain with their dad. That's the way the process out in the rural areas always happens. One of the things too about this, I mentioned to people on a fairly regular occasion that, you know, we have railways running through our communities we've had for what, 100 years, and yet the railway culture isn't steeped or completely embedded in our nerves. And that's the way it certainly was in the rural area. We would load cars but we didn't know a lot about the railway per se, certainly about operations. And one of the reasons we decided to buy it is because farmers are hands-on folk. And for farmers to run something like a railway, it just seemed like something that we could do. So as a result, that was another reason that we bought it. But here are the young people learning to do what Dad does. And hopefully one of those will take over the farm when Dad decides to step down. It's a social event. This is after the loading is done. And there's been some significant activity at each of the sidings when loading does occur. I know that when I mention things like people go to the local spot for a rest or a sandwich, or they'll buy a beer, you figure, wow, what a big deal, right? But for a tiny little town, it is. It recreates the activity, the process of expecting to spend some dollars when you're in town. The loss, somebody had mentioned earlier about the loss of schools and how incredibly devastating that could be to a small town. Well, the loss of grain handling facilities in a grain handling facility community is at least as bad a deal as losing a school. Because farmers used to come to town with their grain, and then they would buy groceries and spend a little time, maybe buy the odd barley sandwich. It was a social, commercial event. Okay. Here we have a bunch of cars loaded, and they're making their way back to the interchange point at Camrose. We have been able to hire some former CN crew members. We're trying to grow our own enginemen and conductors or brakemen, but that's not so easy to do because, like I say, it's not part of our blood. So hopefully down the road, we'll be able to raise up our own train-orientated people. We've instituted a program called composite blending, it says up there. Elevators have been important in the history of railroad or of grain accumulation because they're able to blend grain. Producer cars have a little bit of difficulty with that, so we got a little bit of money from the Alberta government under the Rural Alberta Development Fund, which allowed us to implement a program whereby we were blending on paper, if you could imagine, and a train of 50 cars. Any individual car may not have met the particular spec that the customer was looking for, but when you put the grain from all of the 50 cars together, that blended sample would have met the spec of the purchaser. And that went extremely well, except that we're having a bit of difficulty getting some traction with that program in the industry. Most of the grain players want to use their own facilities to blend. So we're still working on that one as well. So we implemented the composite blending program for two reasons, so that a producer will know what his grain is grading before he loads it. And the program has been able to bring extra value back to our community, and we figure that it was bringing in an extra $200,000 annually to the pockets of our local producers that before was being exported. This slide is put in just to remind me that when one is seeing one's own locomotive pulling one's own grain on one's track, it's a pretty exhilarating experience. That's the Forestburg elevator on the right, and as was mentioned earlier, the folk have become quite used to the train running on a regular basis. This is our new locomotive barn. The first winter we had the locomotive, we didn't have a barn, so we had to idle it. A lot of folk don't realize that most trains in Canada, if they're in use constantly. They never shut off. They don't have antifreeze in the engines. It's just water coolant. So if you shut it off, you know what's going to happen. So you have to keep it running. An SD40 uses 5 gallons of diesel an hour. You do the math. It didn't take us very long to decide we needed to build a barn. And it's been a fabulous thing. Now, going forward, we did move a little bit of light sweet crude for 2 companies out of Alliance, and that business has a fair bit of potential, except you know how things in Alberta are boom and bust. Right now that's all bust. We're not moving any oil. It only lasted for a year, but I think that down the road, when this thing turns around, we'll be back into that. We moved 1,100 cars of oil last year. We moved 2,200 cars of grain, and we moved 300 cars of fertilizer. So a total of about 3,500 cars. So you see why CN is completely tied up in knots over this 3,500 cars. Now, one of the things that we have learned, at the beginning, when I mentioned the word Battle River Railway, we talked about railroading and we talked about grain accumulation, and that was kind of a similar idea. Since then, we've learned that the two are quite separate. So we're in the process of separating out those 2 processes, the running of the train and the accumulation of the grain. And to that end, our local producers, and I don't have a picture of it, but we have just completed 3 pretty spiffy grain handling facilities. One of them is at Roseland, one of them is at Heisler, and the other one is at Alliance. We've spent about $4 million extra on these grain handling facilities. And here's the beautiful thing, and it can happen in a lot of different ways for groups. The farmers who are shareholders in the railway built these facilities, and they charge each other, or we charge each other, a bit of money to use the facility. But we're paying ourselves, like we're paying ourselves back. And all of this money stays in the local community, and it's creating jobs. Not huge numbers of jobs, but when this thing is up and running at a point where we think it's probably going to stay for a while, I think we're going to create the equivalent of about eight full-time jobs, which for a little rural area like our own is pretty significant. So, what else are we planning to do? We are planning, oh yeah, there's those oil cars there, just as if you haven't seen an oil car. Here, this is our latest. We are going to bring city folk back to the rural area. We are trying out a little bit of tourism. Last year we ran 6 tourism excursions, and this year we're running another 6. We're only an hour. Like, if we can find a way to negotiate with CN to get into the yard with our passenger car in Kamloops, we're only 1 hour from Edmonton. And Edmonton has an accumulated population of about 1.1 million or so. So we think that the future for that is bright. The problem is like so many things agricultural, I don't think it's going to make any money. But as long as it breaks even, you know, we as farmers, we're really happy with break-even points. And if it does that, it will accomplish our other goal, which is to re-expose people to what we call the real rural area. Forestburg is the biggest community on that line. It's got 1,000 people. All the other towns combined have about 600. It's kind of a sparsely populated area down there. So we formed a society called the Friends of the Battle River Railway. And we bought this car, well not that car, but a car that looks just about identical to that, from the Kamloops Heritage Society. Maybe some of you folk rode on it. So now, if you want to reacquaint yourself with the old girl from Kamloops, you have to come to Forestburg, Alberta. She's a beauty. We've almost got the heating installed. We found that, you know, in a country where you've got 10 months of winter, you'd better be able to run in the winter time. And figuring out a heat system for a car takes a bit of time, mostly, because we don't have a lot of money in it. It's separate from, the Friends is separate from the railway. We rent the power and the crew from the railway, but the Friends runs the excursion. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that the purchase and operation of the Alliance Sub, now called the Battle River Railway, is the most exciting thing to happen in our area since the original line was built in 1911. The new railway is going to, as I said, provide jobs, provide an alternative grain shipping and marketing service, and create untold possibilities for businesses and community growth in the Battle River area. But you can still wish us luck. However, I'd like to leave you with a slightly different thought. Farming has gone a peculiar way lately, in my estimation. And you know the song about a 16 ton? You loaded 16 ton, and you can kind of imagine, well, you know what that's about, right? So, I write a little bit of poetry, and I haven't got too many original melodies in my head, but I do like writing a bit of poetry. So, I took that melody and I added some words that are different than the ones you know, but they're sort of along a similar vein. So, I think you'll be able to figure out very quickly where this song is going. And if you want to snap your finger, you're more than welcome to do that. I was born one morning when the sun did shine. My father said the farm would one day be mine. You'll grow wheat for your bread and oats for your meal, but pangs of anxiety you might feel. You load 1,000 tons. What do you get? Another year older and deeper in debt. Oh, Cargill, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to agriculture. That's not the end. I'm on the UGG to confide. They'll sell me seed, fertilizer, and a herbicide. My crops are looking super, but my bank account is not. They say it's only accident. The price of wheat is shot. You load 1,000 tons. And what do you get? Another year older and deeper in debt. Oh, Cargill, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to agriculture. Oh, a farmer gets a rush when he sees things grow, and help is there for buying from Monsanto. If you survive the hail and drought and lack of rain, oh, Cargill's waiting patiently to take your grain. You load 1,000 tons. What do you get? Another year older and deeper in debt. Oh, Cargill, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to agriculture. I set you off a tiny bit, didn't I? Okay, last verse. Bear with me. While I'm standing here at 60 years and wondering why I've spent all this time looking up in the sky. I hope my children find a way to break this chain and bring some profit back to raising grain. You load 1,000 tons. What do you get? Another year older and deeper in debt. Oh, Cargill, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go.